I'm so excited this morning to have our guest with us, Marine Officer Eric McElvenny. Would you give him a warm welcome? Come on up. You can be seated. I challenged him to a race, and
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. What a wonderful worship. That's absolutely wonderful. As I'm in town from San Diego, flew in last night, and it's boring there. It's always 80 degrees and sunny, and so someone's got to live there, and I took that one for you, so you guys can enjoy this. But I came here. It's cold here today. You guys said it's a beautiful day for this time of year. It's freezing out there. It's awesome to be here, guys. It really is. It's really cool to have the opportunity to come, and it's humbling to come and to be able to share a little bit of my life with you. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up and share some of my life with you, and talk a little bit about my service and about my walk with the Lord. And yeah, I'm just excited. So who here has ever been to Hawaii? Okay, cool. Quite a few people. Pretty good place, pretty nice. Yeah, I agree. Awesome. All right, a couple years ago I was in Hawaii. And I was 134 miles into a race. And it wasn't all running. It was, I'm not that tough. It was an Ironman, which is a triathlon. And it's just a long day. You swim 2.4 miles, you ride your bike 112 miles, and then you run a marathon, 26.2 miles. And you have 17 hours to do that. So at this point, 134 miles into it, it's a 140.6 mile race. I had already swam. In my head, I was like Michael Phelps ripping through the Pacific. But I wasn't. I saw video. It was more like a giraffe in a bathtub. I made it though. I'm done with the bike ride. I forgot to put on sunscreen. Horrible idea. I still have tan lines from like 3 years ago. And the run. It was hard. I'm 19 miles into the run. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, but I have trouble seeing that light, and I'm starting to question whether I'm in the right tunnel because I was in some serious pain, physical pain, and mental. We have any runners here? You know that side cramp that you get a little bit when you're running? I had it everywhere. I think my teeth were even cramping up. I was in physical pain. My feet felt like cinder blocks, and I only actually have one foot. My left foot felt like a cinder block. My right foot is prosthetic, so it doesn't feel like anything. That's what an amputation feels like. But the end of my limb, I'm a below knee, so the end of my limb, it was in pain. I hadn't taken my prosthetic off yet during that run. I didn't know what was going on under there, but I knew something wasn't right. Not only was I in physical pain, but I also, during a race that takes that long, you have to do a good job of fueling your body, eating the right calories and hydrating. And throughout the day, at some point I messed up because not only was I in physical pain, but now I was out of energy. I was running on empty, and my jog slowed down to a walk, and eventually my body kind of made the decision to sit down. I sat down on the side of the road, 7 miles short of finishing this thing. I did what any good triathlete would do. I ate a peanut butter and jelly Uncrustable sandwich, had it in my pocket. Those things are delicious. And I took my prosthetic leg off, and I set it next to me, and it felt so good to take that thing off. And I looked around, and I was like, wow, I'm feeling pretty good at this point. And I realized, I was sitting there for, honestly, it was under 5 minutes before I realized, if I don't get this leg back on and start going, I might not finish this race. And I didn't come here to stop 7 miles short. So I go to grab my leg, and I went to put it on, and it didn't fit. And I picked it up and looked at it like maybe I grabbed someone else's leg. I was like, no, this is definitely my leg. And I looked down at my limb, and it was just swollen up. It was swollen. My leg didn't fit. And at that point, I felt absolutely defeated. I put my head down, and I felt I wanted to get in the fetal position and kind of cry myself to sleep. I asked myself 2 questions. And the first one was, how did I get myself into this? This sucks. And the second one was who would ever do more than one of these things? I know people that have done multiple Ironman races, and this is like crazy. But so I'm gonna take a step back from that story. I'll come back to it a little bit later. But if you notice, there's a lot of bad things going on. I'm in pain. I'm tired. I'm out of energy. They're stacking up. At that point in time in my life, there were a lot of really good things. There were a lot of blessings that it was hard for me to see. I was alive. That was a good thing. I was in Hawaii. Great place to be. My family was with me. I was competing in a sport. I've always loved sports, and I'm out there, and I was doing it. And these good things, like, man, there's so many blessings there. And I just couldn't see them because they were masked by the pain and the fatigue that I was feeling. And I'm here to talk about the struggles a little bit. Because at that point in time, I was going through kind of a physical struggle. And that's where you guys all kind of come into my story as, that struggle during a race, a little bit of pain. That's nothing compared to what some of us go through, in our relationships, marital, financial, work, addiction, loss. Like, we have struggles every day in our lives. And I think it's where we go with those struggles that's important, because we all do it. And it's okay. It's okay to have those challenges and those struggles, because they end up making us stronger. But what's important is where we go. And it's been pretty interesting. Sometimes it's hard to see where God's working in our lives. But for me, like when I look in the rearview mirror and look back on my life, it's so easy to recognize the different points that he showed up. And that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to go back and talk a little bit about how I got to that race and maybe what happened after that. But I really want to pull out that in those times of struggle, the where I went was to our Lord, and He gave that strength. So I grew up in Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania, a little bit south of Pittsburgh. So I do know a little bit about somewhat cold weather. And I had two older sisters that used to pick on me and beat me up when I was little, but I could take them now. No, we love each other very much. My parents just set an amazing example as parents, and in their marriage, they're just an amazing marriage. Actually, I grew up. We were kind of poor. I grew up in a trailer park, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that we would have been considered poor by certain standards, because what my parents valued was more important, and that was family and love and support. And I live out in San Diego. My sisters and parents, they live on the East Coast in Pennsylvania still, and I still talk to them, a couple times a week. And there's something special about that bond that my parents really gave us a good foundation. Growing up, I went to church. I did go to church, but I went to church, I think, more out of duty. I didn't have a relationship with the Lord. I knew I knew about Him, but I didn't know Him. It was different. I went to church because I had to, and that continued through school. Like I said already, love sports. We got people who love sports here, and yeah, we got some fans. I see a lot of Packer shirts out there. That's good stuff. Yeah, go Pack! All right, that's cool. I loved baseball, loved football, but because I love sports so much, I had to appreciate school, because it was my mom's rule. I had to do well in school to play on the sports team. So I did. I got good grades, and it was a school assignment that ended up having a pretty big impact on me. I had to do a career research report in the 8th grade. What do I want to be when I grow up? Research it and write about it. And I wasn't sure, and I went home and asked my parents and my mom. I forget what she said, but my dad said, you should check out the military. I was like, okay. I'll check out the military. And at that point in time, this is the mid-90s, the Marine Corps had the best commercials. They had guys like climbing mountains and slaying dragons. I was like, wow, that's it. That's what I want to do. I want to be a Marine when I grow up. So I wrote that report about the United States Marine Corps. And when I wrote that report, I quickly became impressed with what the Marines represent. That's just their rich history, the stories of the heroes, the stories of valor. And in the 8th grade, realized that people were sacrificing their lives, sacrificing the way they live their lives, and they always have been. And realized that there's always going to be people sacrificing the way they live their life to provide freedom for our nation. And I knew that I wanted to be a part of that. So I decided I was going to be a Marine when I grew up. I continued to get older. I had to keep getting good grades because I wanted to keep playing sports. And the path that I ended up taking to get into the Marine Corps was through the United States Naval Academy. The Naval Academy, it's a 4-year college. It's in Maryland. Has anyone ever heard of it? Some people, yeah. Has anyone ever heard of, there you go. Has anyone here ever heard of West Point? Yeah. So we're like West Point, but way better. Yeah, there we go. Actually, Navy football team. When you see the Army-Navy game, I went to Navy. Beat Notre Dame yesterday, big day for us. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. But I went to the Naval Academy. It was tough. It was challenging. I studied mechanical engineering. That wasn't easy. I don't know why I did that, but it was good. I did that. I played rugby there. That's a cool sport. Has anyone here ever played rugby? Yeah. That's if you like to walk around and hit people like that. I guess that's your sport. If that's your thing. So I played rugby. Most important thing that happened to me at the Naval Academy is I met my wife. My wife was also a student there. My wife is awesome. She's, I think what stood out to me about her early on, her name is Rachel, is Rachel was very strong, and not like physically strong. Like she's 5 foot, 100 pounds, and that's soaking wet. Like she's a tiny, but just independent, confident, and there's just something about her that I was drawn to. And I used to go to her for help all the time for my mechanical engineering classes. And it wasn't really because I cared that much about my grades. I just thought she was really cute. You know? And I got to know her. We fell in love. And my strategy of going to her for help paid off because we ended up getting married and starting a family. We were both commissioned officers in the military. Thank you. We were both commissioned officers. I was a Marine Corps officer, her a naval officer in 2006. We ended up heading out to San Diego. There are a lot of bases in San Diego, so we can go and live in the same place and both work. But those early years, they were tough. We knew it was going to be hard, didn't realize how hard it was going to get. We did 5 deployments. I did 3, she did 2. So basically, I left, I came back, she left, she came back. And we had a young daughter this whole time. And it was hard. It was hard. When people say thank you for your sacrifice, that's what I think about the most, is the times that I'm leaving to go train, or leaving to go on a 7-month deployment. I'll never forget having to kiss my young daughter goodbye when she's in her crib. And it's like, I'll see you in 7 months. You know, it's really, really hard. And so that sacrifice, take time away from family. People are doing it right now. We got men and women doing it right now. And that sacrifice was really special. But that was hard. It took a toll on our family, on my wife and I, the constant deployments. Has anyone here ever had an argument with their spouse? Whoa, your hand went up really quick. That's me. No, we had a ton of arguments. Hey, and that's perfectly natural. That's what happens. But the issue was we were both kind of prideful. When we got super busy, life got chaotic. That thing when I was going to church, I wasn't in a relationship with the Lord, but I knew that He was there. That's the first thing that fell off. You know, we didn't have time to go to church. I didn't have time to do Bible studies. That was in my head. And at that point in time, when we look back now, we were both as far from the Lord that we ever had been and ever will be at that point in time. And our marriage continued to hurt. We were prideful. We were trying to do it on our own. We were trying to fix it on our own, and it wasn't getting fixed. It got to the point that we were getting a divorce. We had divorce papers in. My wife was getting ready to do her final deployment. And we just said, okay, let's just hold off on that divorce for a little bit. When you get back from the deployment, we'll rehash, we'll talk about it. She left on the deployment. My daughter was about 3.5 years old, and I recognized, like, hey, when I was little, I went to church, so I should probably be taking her to church. And I found a church with a great kids program right by the house, and I went, took her, got her all set up. And you can't just drop your kid off at church and go home and watch football, because they frown on that. So I'd go into the sermon. They didn't let me do that. So I'd go into the sermon, and quickly, I began to look forward to Sundays. And then not only that, I'd open the Bible at home. And then I got my daughter involved in a Wednesday program that I started volunteering in. And slowly, I became excited about something that I didn't really know before. I knew that there was a God, but I didn't know what it meant to be in a relationship with Him. And I grew, and that is when I really committed myself to the Lord. I was excited. I was sending emails to my wife. I was sending the sermons to my wife, and she saw me excited, and I got her excited. And when I quickly realized that, one, we are all sinners. We are not perfect. And I thought that she was supposed to be perfect, and she wasn't. And I recognized that I wasn't perfect either. But realizing what a real loving relationship is, there's grace involved. And God has grace on us, and it's a good thing, because I've done some bad things, you know. I'm a sinner. I can forgive my wife. She can forgive me. And that's when our marriage grew back together. And the timing of it was really good. She was coming back from her deployment, and it actually kind of worked out poorly, where she got extended an extra month and I was supposed to go to Afghanistan, and there was a little bit of overlap. So we almost didn't see each other. Luckily, my daughter and I was able to fly out to Hawaii to at least spend 10 days together. Best 10-day vacation ever, where my wife and I spent time together, and like we felt like a family, and we were beginning to thrive because the Lord was in our relationship. I went to Afghanistan. I had an awesome job there. I worked with the Afghan National Army. I was an advisor to them. I led a small team of 4 guys. We were embedded into a 120-man Afghan Army infantry company, and we were operating in Afghanistan, keeping a couple villages safe. And I think what I'll take away from Afghanistan was the kids. Watching the kids skip to school in the morning with a smile on their face was really special for me, because their alternative to that, they didn't have a school in these villages. They would have grown up, the boys would have been recruited into the Taliban, and little girls, they weren't allowed to be educated. They weren't allowed to do that. So being there and giving them hope was special. That's what I'll take away from Afghanistan. I was there for 3.5 months. On December 9th, woke up at about 4:30, did some final preparation to go on a patrol. We'd be walking through a village, kind of routines, stuff that we did every day. We were out there for about 5 hours. It's funny, every time I tell this story, the patrol gets a little bit longer. So we're heading back from the 6-hour patrol, going back to our patrol base, and as we're going back about 1,000 meters from the patrol base, I stepped on an improvised explosive device. And I triggered an explosion underneath my right foot. And I remember the experience being very violent. It picked my body up and threw me to the ground. I was conscious throughout, but I was dazed at first. I had a concussion, so I wasn't sure what was going on. My ears were ringing, just a high-pitched ringing. In fact, I didn't hear the explosion. I heard, kind of sounded like someone opening a cold can of Coke or something. Just heard a pop, and then my ears were ringing. Life felt like it was in slow motion. I felt wetness on my left leg up pretty high, but I didn't feel any pain. Slowly, I began to put things together. I realized that I'm in Afghanistan, that I'm laying on my back looking into a beautiful blue sky, not a cloud in the sky. That's what it was 1 second ago. Now it's full of smoke, full of dust. I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. I knew that I stepped on an IED, and I wasn't feeling pain. That's when I thought that there was a chance I was dying. And I remember the 2 thoughts that went through my head. The first one, I thought, I guess this is it. I guess I get to go to heaven. I guess I'll get to go to heaven. It wasn't necessarily a scary thought, but I kind of realized I wasn't in control, and I accepted it. And right after that, I thought about my wife and my daughter. And although I think heaven's going to be a really great place, there's still a lot of things on this earth that I wanted to do. I wanted to raise my daughter and grow old with my wife, and that's when I got a little bit scared. And my corpsman, my medic, 21-year-old Michael Strum, he came running over to me, and he began to treat me. And the Marines took care of me because that's what we do. And they got me out of there, called in a helicopter, took off. I was into surgery within 40 minutes of the IED. I remember waking up and looking down. And I was missing my right leg below the knee. I had bandages all over my left leg, all over my left arm. I had IVs in me. I couldn't sit up on my own. I was in really bad shape. But I was alive. I was alive. 2 things really jump out at me about that day. And the first one was, as a Marine officer, I like being in control. I was in control of everything. I planned the route that our patrol went on. We had an alternate route. We had places that helicopters can land. We kind of had everything planned out. I like being in control. When I stepped on that IED, I felt that control totally be ripped away from me as my body was flung around. I realized, man, I am not in control. God is in control. And the second thing is that God, He was there during that time. Things could have been a lot worse. The helicopter that came and picked me up, it was already in the air. And it got there so quick because it was already in the air. The IED that I stepped on was small. I've seen IEDs that flip vehicles over. That would have been a bad thing. The one I stepped on was small. My mom has a kind of a cool story. She has a bunch of cool stories. She calls them God sightings. But she had a Bible study. One of the women was sending us, I've never met this woman, but she was sending us cookies, myself and my team, cookies for the holidays because we were getting close to Christmas. And she went to the post office and paid for them and sent them off, and she was walking back to her car, and as she was getting right up to her car ready to grab the handle, she just felt the need to go in and say a prayer So she went in to the post office, talked to the worker, said, hey, I just mailed off this box, and it's going to a couple of service members over in Afghanistan. Do you mind if we pray over that box? And the woman behind the counter said, no, I'm actually a prayer leader at my church. And they pulled the box out and they prayed over that box. And a couple weeks after the injury, we found out that was December 9th, the same day that I stepped into that IED, that she felt compelled to go back and pray with someone else over that box. And this really talks to the power of prayer. And I think that's very, very special. So, because I'm a Christian doesn't mean that I'm not going to go through challenging times. Because we're Christians doesn't mean that we're not going to struggle. But when we do struggle, when we do have those challenges, God's going to be there to give us strength through it. And it's important to realize that. And I think everyone's going to struggle. It's how you struggle that's important. I like a quote by Chuck Swindoll, Pastor Chuck Swindoll, who he said, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And I kind of like that because there's, you talked about control. We're not in control, but we have choices. We have free will and we have choices. And I want to talk about some of the choices in our lives that we're able to make. And I think one of the first things that God did in my life is the people that he put in my life in that time of need was exactly who I needed and when I needed them. The first one was my little daughter. So she was 5 years old when I was injured. She was in kindergarten, and I remember before leaving, it's like, all right, I'm going to go to work for 7 months. Good luck in kindergarten. Love you. It was tough. And then I went and deployed. I got hurt. My wife had to sit her down and tell her that I had got hurt and lost my leg, and she sat her down and said, Lupe, Daddy got hurt at work. He lost one of his legs. He's going to be coming home. We need to be there to support him. And my daughter quickly asked her a question. She said, well, when is Daddy coming home? And my wife said, he's going to be home in 5 days. And my daughter took about 10 seconds to process this information. And then she smiled. And she said, Daddy's going to be home for Christmas. And I thought that was very special. Because what would seem like a very negative event for me and my wife and family, my little 5-year-old daughter, the childlike way of thinking, she pulled something positive from the situation, and that's what she focused on. And I realized that that's the type of person that I want to be around. Now, I don't know what's better, like having a leg or being home for Christmas, but the whole having a leg, like that was gone. Instead of her focusing her energy on that, she decided to focus on something positive. And I was home in San Diego. We did Christmas at the hospital. We had to reroute Santa Claus, but he came, and it was the most memorable Christmas that I think I'll ever have. It was very special. But I realized that that positive person, that's the type of person that I want to be. It's hard to control emotions, sadness, anger, like that happens. Like those things happen. Those are ones where it's just like, God, please work on my heart. But we do make the choice of how we react to things, and having that positive attitude, looking for those positive things, like that has been important in my life. Another important person that God injected into my life was my boss, my commanding officer, Major Moore, who he was still in Afghanistan. About a week and a half after my injury, he sent me an email, and it said, hey, Eric, let me know when you're going to run your first marathon. And at first, I thought that he was a real jerk, But I knew what he was doing. He knew what I needed to hear to get inspired to move on. And I think because he challenged me at running a marathon, I just had to one-up him. So the hardest thing that I could think of at the time was an Ironman triathlon. It just sounded miserable. I was like, you know what? That's where I'm going to set my goal. I set my goal to run an Ironman. Don't set limits on what God can do, right? So I set that goal to run an Ironman. Next thing I know, 2 months after my injury, I go to put on my first prosthetic leg, and my prosthetic practitioner, Peter Harsh, it's crazy. I set that goal to run an Ironman. I had never met anyone who had ever been crazy enough to actually do something like that. But the person that would be making my leg, and that would have to continue to make this leg because the limbs don't grow back yet. We're not that far in science. He has run 14 Ironman triathlons. He's qualified for the Kona Ironman World Championship 5 different times. Just an amazing triathlete. I was like, wow, what a coincidence, right? That one had God's fingerprints all over it. He introduced me to an organization that helps people with disabilities get into sports, and they got me hooked up with a team to go compete at the Ironman World Championships. I got hooked up with a coach team. On my team was retired Pittsburgh Steeler Hines Ward, which is really cool for me because I'm a Steelers fan. You may have heard of him. If not, he's also season 10 winner of Dancing with the Stars. Women might know that, I don't know. But I got to meet him and train with him for 8 months and go compete in that Ironman. Training was hard. There were some ups, there were some downs, like I can get into it. There was one time that my right leg wasn't fitting really well, and I threw it against the wall in our house, and my wife just like shook her head. But the training was intense. It was like 25 hours or so of training a week, where it's very regimented. Like my coach would give me the schedule, and it's hour swim followed by a run. The next day, 5-hour bike ride with this, and each day was very detailed. Like I knew where my heart rate needed to be. I knew what pace I'm supposed to be running. I knew how many calories I was supposed to be eating. It was very, very detailed. And my wife helped point this out to me when she asked me, hey, what's your workout today? And I told her, and I had it down to a T of how much I was drinking, how much I was eating, and then she asked me the question, well, all right, when are you reading what are you reading in the Bible today? And I said, I don't know. I'll probably get to that after. And I realized that's where my priorities started to get a little bit off, because I had this very detailed triathlon plan, and my spiritual plan, my walk was a little bit off. It was kind of, when I get to it, I will, and that's when I recognized, like, whoa, I need to make that a bigger priority. I do. And I like it in the Bible, there's so many times in Jesus' 3-year ministry on earth, very busy man, walking around healing people, and extremely busy. In the Gospels, there's so many times where he gets away and he goes and spends time with the Lord. And that is the example that we should be following. So I've made that a priority. When I wake up, first thing that I do is I think about my day, everything that I'm going to do in it, and I ask the Lord to bless it and to be there and to give me strength through it. And I open the Bible and I spend my time doing my devotion then, because that is the priority. I continued to work through the training, finally got out to Hawaii to run that race. And so I was sitting there on the side of the road with my leg off, really defeated, out of energy. I just eaten that peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but I couldn't get my leg on. And I kind of took a step back a little bit and looked at the big picture. And it's at that time, I was struggling. I was in pain. I was looking at my watch because I had a time goal, and I was missing it, and it was tough. But then finally I was able to kind of do what my daughter did and think of something positive. I was like, wow, man, I'm out here. It was 22 months after the explosion, and I was out there running an Ironman at the Ironman World Championships, on a course that people try to get to their entire life. I was competing in a sport. I had my family out there. The team was awesome. There were so many blessings. It's like, I'm going to finish this thing. I don't know how I'm going to finish this thing, though. And I just remember digging down deep, going back into the problem-solving mode, and I laid on my back and elevated my leg to let the fluid get out, and then I jammed my leg on as far as I could, and I got up and I started walking. And after about a quarter of a mile, my leg was on far enough that I could start running. And at that point, that peanut butter and jelly sandwich that I ate gave me some energy. And I pulled up my sleeve, because when I run without my sleeve, my leg falls off, and that's not a good thing. So I pulled that up, and I started running. And those last 7 miles, they were hard. But crossing that finish line, it's hard to put those emotions into words. It's, instantly turned into an accomplishment. It was very special. I was able to answer those 2 questions that I asked, like, how did I get myself into this? And I thought back those 22 months when I was in that hospital bed, unable to even sit up on my own, and I was setting that goal, and just that journey, those 22 months, the people that I met, how God had injected himself into my life, and how I grew and how I matured was something special. And then who would ever do more than one of those things, right? Well, after about 2 hours, when I was feeling a little bit better, I was like, man, I think I can go faster than that. And so I had already reached my goal of running an Ironman, so I set another goal to, there's an amputee that ran an Ironman and way faster than that, so I'm shooting for the amputee record now, and I'm racing in 2 weeks, and I'm going for it. Should be a lot of fun. Thank you. Thanks. I once had a high school student ask me, if I can go back to the day that I stepped on that IED, what would I change? And when you're asked a question like in a Q&A, you got to give an answer. So I think the first thing I said was, probably wouldn't step right there, because that hurt, But honestly, it's not what he was asking. For me, over the past 4.5 years, I have grown and I have matured. I don't think I was a bad person prior to, but my path changed, and it definitely, as far as I'm concerned, it changed for the better. It brought me closer to the Lord. It did. I realized that when I was on the battlefield, when I thought that there was a chance that I was dying, the two things that I thought of, the first one was going to heaven, and the second one was my family. Those must be the two most important things in my life. Those are the two things that I thought of when I thought I was dying. I didn't think about my car payment or my house. I didn't think about my clothes or my shoes or other things. Those were it. And I realized those are my two priorities. And now I kind of use those, and I make sure, am I living with those two as my priorities? Those are what help me make my decisions in my life. And we all struggle, right? I struggle. And there's a verse that I like. It's actually my mom and I, we kind of came up with it together. And it's Isaiah 40:31. For those who hope in the Lord shall renew their strength. They will soar on wings with eagles. They will run and not grow weary, and walk and not be faint. And at first I liked it because you're talking about running and soaring and stuff. But I realized it's that first part. Those who hope in that Lord shall renew their strength. And it's that. I realize that what I'm going through in my life is nothing compared to the gospel, compared to what the Lord does, compared to what he did to bring us back to him by sending his son Jesus to this earth to die for our sins. And I think about that. So when I am low and when I'm struggling and I'm in a battered, a tough place, I think of that. And that hope in the Lord, that brings me to a better place, because that is so much bigger than everything that I'm doing at that point. So I know, I talked a little bit about choices, like, it's our attitude, that's our choice. We have free will to make those choices, but the best choice that I've ever made in my life, the best commitment, was when I committed myself to the Lord. When my wife was deployed, honestly, saved my marriage. And when I got hurt, it was a foundation. I had strength to go through that instead of being upset with that. Because people ask me, are you mad that God let that happen to you? No, he didn't, he doesn't control evil. Evil happens because of us. He was there to help me in a time of struggle. So that commitment that I made to the Lord, that made all the difference in my life. And I would I'd like you guys to join me in prayer if you would. If you would bow your heads with me. And if you would like to commit yourself to the Lord today, if you would raise your hand just so I can take a peek at you while I pray with you.